let me jump back to Naval there, because I love him. The whole podcast on wealth creation, which is like he called it like Tweet Storm,
Gold
right?
mine.
So
Gold
for
mine.
anyone who's thinking about scaling, growing business, trying to be wealthy, I would recommend that. I recommend it all the time. But I love that. For people who don't know, he did this thing on Twitter where it was like a 42 tweets about wealth generation. And then he read it and broke it down into like 42 podcast tracks, like 42 podcast episodes. So you can just go listen to one. The one I love is where he talks about like time and money and, kind of like he gives himself this aspirational hourly wage, which is, it could be $300, it could be $5,000, and says like, if it costs less to, have someone else do it, like if it's going to take you 2 hours to mow your lawn and your time is worth $300 an hour, you can get your lawn mowed for less than $300 an hour. Pay some guy $60 to mow your lawn and use that hour to build something great. You're not going to build that thing that's great by eating away at your day by doing all these stupid little chores. And I think that's what so many people in life do. And it's really taken a lot of effort or a lot of work for me to kind of figure out what is worth paying to have done so that I can focus on the important work, right? And not everyone's on that same page. I think it's hard when you have a spouse who might have a different view on money and, like, don't pay someone to do that. We can do that ourselves. Whether it be your parents or something,
That was my parents. Like, my mom was always like, do it yourself. You just got to like, why would you pay someone to come clean the house or like do the landscaping or work on your car? Like, you can change the oil yourself. And my dad was like, to his fault, right? Like, he basically got in his 70s now, and he like doesn't know how to do basic things for himself because he was just like so averse to it. But yeah, like 4-Hour Workweek was the first thing that actually taught me that, which is Tim Ferriss's best-selling book, where he gives the analogy of like, if you make $35 an hour, if you can find a task that you will pay $30 for, no, the reverse, $40 for, whether it's logo design or video editing or cleaning something for you, you are by having someone do that task for you, you're only paying $5 to have them do it, because your wage is $35, they charge $40, because with that time you can then make $35 back, is kind of the mentality behind it. And It's so funny that you bring up Naval, because I'm writing a video right now talking, and it's so funny. The video is might be called Why I Still Pitch Restaurants Even Though I Don't Have One. And it comes from this idea that Naval responded to this guy on Twitter, where they asked, what would be the best bet as a career in today's day and age for a young professional in early 20s? And his response, which is such a Navalism, was skills, not careers, period. That's it. And I think that so encapsulates kind of like what I love. One about Naval is that he's so concise and to the point and full of wisdom, because he spent so much time introspectively thinking about these things and getting real world experiences. But also in that answer, there's so much to unpack, in the sense that like the idea of having a career is dwindling and dwindling, man. Like, it's evaporating. Like, it's a little tiny pool and we're all watching it go away. The way to be valuable in today's job market in general, like the age of the internet, is to be able to market your skills. It's not your college diploma. It's not the place on your resume. Sometimes it matters, yes, if that place has weight, but to be able to say to you or me, Chris, where it's like, I'm interested in like opening a brick and mortar. Oh, well, I actually have skills where I can cook, but then I can also have a camera presence and on-camera presence as an employee of yours. Like, those are two skills. I would much rather hire for that rather than all of these other sorts of things. So I'm writing a video on that specifically because I think even if you don't have the ambition to own a traditional restaurant, the restaurant environment, especially at a place that has it figured out, in the sense that they don't go through these lulls of like not having customers, or that they're like a new restaurant that potentially has the potential to shut down. You have the ability there to get skills. If you go to an institution of a restaurant that's been around for a while, you can go there, you can spend time working, and you can get the skills that I think are required to be a professional chef in whatever you want to have a food truck, you want to do pop-ups, you want to do in-person, private chefing, like anything that runs the gamut. A restaurant environment is one of the best places to get those skills.
Well, and some of our listeners have probably heard this or know this about me, but I worked at IKEA for almost 3 years. And a lot of friends razzed me at the time, you're a real chef. Like, what are you doing? Just making meatballs. But you look at them and they're a global $1 billion organization. I've never worked for an organization as well organized or as good as what they do as them, from marketing to hire. You learn how to hire, you learn how to give critical evaluations to your staff, you learn how to market. It's this crazy thing. Like, we would have a dry erase board with a map of the kitchen, the restaurant in IKEA. Have you been to an IKEA before?
Yep, totally.
So I would have to watch one guy and then follow him with a marker on the dry erase board. And every time he stopped, put an X. And then I'd have to pick someone else and do that. And then after doing this for half an hour, you had to analyze the X's, right? So everyone's standing at this point. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean a bunch of things. One, it could mean there's a bottleneck. Maybe we put the silverware there and everyone's stopping and it takes a lot of time. So maybe we need to move it. Or maybe that is the case, but also could we put our high margin item there so it's getting extra exposure? So if everyone's staying at this spot for 30 seconds to get their silverware, if we get, a 60% profit on this dime cake, should we put the cake there and use it as a marketing opportunity? That's the kind of stuff that you don't learn in a traditional mom and pop or even a Michelin restaurant, but they have that down. And it was that kind of stuff that I left even after just 2 or 3 years there that was invaluable in starting a business.
I have a old sous chef of mine who would wear a pedometer before your phone was so good at keeping track of your steps, because he would get pissed if the day's numbers were more than the steps he took the day before, because it meant that he was being inefficient in his movements in the kitchen. Where it's if he saw I took 2,500 extra steps that day, what was it that I was running around so much? I don't want to be running around. I want to be so effective that I move as little as possible. I make one trip to the walk-in, grab all the stuff I need, and then I can just stand there and prep. One point that makes me think of, which is a fascinating story. The other point is I was listening to either an audiobook or a podcast, I can't remember, that spoke, it was an audiobook that spoke on the value of IKEA putting food in the middle of the shopping experience at their retail locations, because the data shows that humans' ability to make these kinds of frivolous retail buying decisions are you're more easily marketed to when your blood sugar is satiated. So IKEA took a look at it and they're like, why is the IKEA restaurant not at the end of the shopping experience? It's in the middle, because they want you to be a better customer. You know what I mean? In the sense that you're going to spend more money.
There's a number of reasons also. One of the things is to reinforce the low price profile. I actually wrote a blog post on this that went viral, and it ended up in the New York Post, and I caught some crap. I had a lot of people from IKEA reach out to me. I didn't think it was a big secret. It's the idea of loss leaders, but basically, you're a young guy, you've never bought a couch, you go into their store, is $599 a good price for a couch? I don't know. But
sure.
That for 99 cents where you get this breakfast with coffee, that's a good deal. A hot dog's 50 cents, that's a good deal. Yep. A whole meatball dinner is $3.99. So you're taking a literal loss on the food to psychologically tell people that everything here is a better price, even if that's not true. But They use that to reinforce that. And I wrote about that, and I didn't expect it was going to go viral. And then it ended up in all these newspapers. It was on an Australian TV show where I was quoted, and then it was turned into this show in London called Tricks of the Restaurant Trade. So
amazing.
It kind of the doors got blown off. It was on the Quora website. Yep. Someone was talking about marketing, and I'd given that as an example, and somehow it just got all these upvotes, and it has to date 3 million upvotes or something. And it's crazy, but things like that where they're using psychology to market their products. And I think that's where guys like us hopefully are going to be successful. I think if you just focus on restaurants, the restaurant business, you're going to have a hard time. I think you need to look at business leaders and other organizations and see what they do, and then apply it back to the food business.
Well, so I immediately thought of and I apologize that my head always goes to fine dining, but that's a bunch of the news that I cover on my podcast. When Massimo Bottura partnered with Gucci because he went to high school with a guy who's like either a co-president or something, like someone super high up at Gucci. And they basically took like a similar breakfast at Tiffany's model. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of like screwing up the details of this, but where you would have a food experience in a retail environment because you have all these sorts of benefits to kind of gain from engineering something like that in your brick and mortar. Because in the same way that like restaurants struggled during COVID, like retail struggling, just retail has been struggling for a while. And so like you can, and this comes back to, again, one of my first points about like making the most of, you could have taken that experience at IKEA and been like, oh, well, this is just such a humdrum thing. Like I'm cooking in a furniture store. Or you can pay attention to the details, the whys of what's going on, the larger forces that play. And then, maybe you decide like, I don't know, pick a brand that is like struggling. You now have this skill that is cooking and being able to integrate into these different types of business models and incorporate that into something that you're going to offer them. And then you could effectively create your dream job. I don't know. I just think people either simplify things a little bit too much, or they focus too much on the negative aspects of, insert position or job.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. Like, I don't even know that I want cooking to be what I do for the rest of my life anymore. Like I want to be in the food world, and I left a job so I could start my personal chef business, and I love it. It's fulfilling when I get to create dishes and going out and cooking. And Chefs Without Restaurants was like this little side thing I was doing almost as a joke. Like I thought it was going to be like 4 people that I knew who we were just going to gig share to help each other get more work. It was so I didn't have to pay advertisers. We could like gig share. And it's turned into this community of people with all these things now. And now I'm helping people with doing their websites and doing marketing and trying to get, deals with sponsors and stuff. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the process of podcasting. And it's like, wow, I don't even know how much I want to go cooking anymore. Like because the cooking's not scalable, right? Like that's what everyone always said is like, how do you grow? How do you scale? And I didn't want to be back to the office manager where I'm sending a bunch of cooks out to go do Perfect Little Bites dinners and I'm not cooking because I didn't enjoy that. But this is different. And this is like the scalable thing. So I still want to hold Perfect Little Bites close to me. Like that's going to be my thing. And I don't see releasing that. But as Chefs Without Restaurants grows into a much bigger thing, that's the organization that I'm going to be bringing people onto and growing. And it's still in the food world. It's just, it's like only 3 years old at this point, and I never thought it was going to be this thing.
I think there's another piece, and I think it's Patrick Collison, who's another writer for Stripe, said this in the similar line of, if you know how to cook, you will never be without friends. And so I think that if anybody is like, because there's a lot of sunk costs too, right? Like you and I spent a lot of time getting these skills to cook well, and we spent a lot of begrudging time just being disciplined and just like getting to where we are at. And so this idea of giving up food in the way that you might have the relationship to food right now, which is like 5 days a week, long days, service starts here and ends here type of environment, it can be really hard to give that up. But doing the work to kind of take a second and think like, do I have to serve dinner every night to be satiated with what I create and put on the plate? And that goes back to my point of like, why would I not focus the business around this other thing that scales and spreads the ideas and also makes money? But then I leave the cooking part and the menu creation and the food execution part to the point when I can actually be happy if we have 15 people gathered around a table on a Friday night. Like it's not reliant on filling all of the seats. Like what if I use that as a mental model? And that just completely blew the door off of it for me, because I was like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I have weeks now where I have 4 events in a week, and I'm almost like, man, I wish I didn't have to cook 4 days this week,
Bravo.
Yeah, well, it's been so interesting with COVID. Now I'm seeing a lot of things that used to be big, like weddings. A lot of people are doing these like 10 to 20 person weddings where normally they would have gone to 300 people. And it's insane the amount of people who are now just saying, I've rented an Airbnb on a farm and we want 15 people to do this wedding. Can you do that? Or do you know someone? And I think that's where personal chefs and people in this business have a little edge right now if you don't have a brick and mortar and you're looking to pick up things like this.
I let out such a sigh of relief when we had an 800-person gala scheduled at the end of March, and it obviously had to get canceled because of COVID. And we had to pivot to, like you said, these like, because we're also opening up in phases in Washington where it's like these smaller gatherings, which was basically like, that's what I was doing before I just, came on with this company. Whereas like small, intimate, like really focused, I could cook all of the food style events where it's like, that is such a comfort zone for me. And I really love that kind of environment. So I was like beyond jazzed when that was the option. You know what I mean?